I'm Idiotac, and this is my PC performance review of No Man's Sky. So, to start with, I'm running an i7-5820K overclocked to 4.4 GHz. I'm running a GTX 980, and I'm using 16 GB of RAM, DDR4 RAM. In the top right hand corner of the screen, you can see my CPU, GPU, and current FPS. So, a lot of people have been complaining that this game runs terribly for them, that they're getting lots of crashing, hitching, and I am having some of those issues, and I want to give people a reference point for someone running the type of hardware I'm running, so that they know whether or not they're going to have problems running this game. So before we get started, I want to jump into the graphics options menu very briefly. Okay, so we have full screen borderless and windowed. Do not run this in borderless, it affects performance. You can choose which monitor, resolution, VSync on or off. We have two different kinds of anti-aliasing, off, FXAA and SSAA times 4. We have 100 field of view and 100 flight view, which is kind of cool and appreciated. We have 16 anisotropic filtering, texture detail high, shadow detail high, generation detail high, reflection quality high, show HUD on, and no limit on the FPS. So, everything's maxed out. Now, every time you change anything in this game, you have to restart the title, and that's kind of a pain in the ass, especially if you're having performance problems, because you have to go through the entire introductory cutscene every time you want to make a change. So, have I been having performance issues? Yes. Have they resolved themselves? Somewhat. And the reason for this is simple. When I first loaded up the game, it was set on medium and the frame rate was capped at 30 FPS. I ramped everything up to high, hit apply, and it ran like crap. I was getting maybe 40 FPS when I first started playing the game. I set everything to low. I hit apply. I restarted the game. I was getting decent FPS. I set everything back up to high one more time, hit apply, restarted the game, and for some reason my FPS went from around 40 up to around 100, as you're seeing now. I don't know why this is, but Total Biscuit also had this problem, and he talked about it in his video. I spoke to him about it on Skype, and he confirmed he had the same situation happen to him. So, if you are having performance issues, I strongly recommend that you do that. There is a post on Reddit now with some specific details on what you can change and what helps. I will post a link to that in the description box below. But if you are having performance issues, I strongly suggest you do that first. Okay, next up, options menu. You can't enter in any of these values manually. You have to click and hold to do anything in this game. The mouse control in this game is very annoying in the user interface in general when you're dealing with your inventory. You have to hold the mouse down for about a second before it will do anything. I don't know why that's the case. I guess the developers don't trust us to click things, but it becomes very frustrating very quickly. Okay, so let's back out. In the top right-hand corner of the screen, you can see my current GPU usage, CPU usage, and my current FPS. I'm getting about 120 FPS right now, and I'm running a GTX 980, so that's pretty good. Let's look around. Okay, pretty nice looking planet, some nice atmosphere. Now, I will say the texture detail in this game is piss poor. It's about as good as it is on the PlayStation 4, and that's highly disappointing. There's a bunch of random creatures here. I'm not going to spoil too much of the game for you if you do want to actually go and play this. So, what issues am I having now? Well, the major performance issues I was experiencing have been drastically reduced by doing the thing that I just told you about. The only other issue I'm really having is an issue with hitching. I'm going to try and demonstrate that to you, but it is kind of difficult because it happens at random. So I'm going to fly across the planet's surface, try to speed up a little bit. It would actually be nice if I could get to the daytime side of the planet to demonstrate some of this stuff to you. But the game uses a technique called dithering to pop in new objects. You may be seeing some of that now as we fly over the planet. It's difficult to see in this light, but there's a technique being used called dithering. Basically, it has this grainy consistency to it as it pops in objects. I would have preferred a fade personally, but whatever. It doesn't look very nice. Now, one thing this game drastically needs is a distance slider. For people with high-end machines, it would be nice for them to be able to get rid of some of that pop-in, and for people with low-end machines, it would be nice to reduce it so that they can have better performance. That's something I feel they need to add. Okay, so now I'm flying over the planet, I'm getting some frame rate variance. It's dropping down to around 70. Now, on some planets, depending on how dense the planet is, this planet isn't particularly dense, you will get massive frame drops. If it's a very grassy, foliage-heavy planet, I'm getting frame drops down to around 50 at times. Now, considering my hardware, that seems a little unreasonable given that I massively exceed the recommended specifications for the game. But that's what I'm getting, you know? And this is really just a reference point for people who want to know what a system like mine can achieve in a game like this, completely maxed out. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to space, because I want to try and illustrate to you the hitching problem. I'm not really experiencing it right now, but when objects and environmental detail loads in, the frame rate has a tendency to tank temporarily and then jump back up. It's not a major issue, it's not game breaking for me like the FPS problems were in the beginning, but it is kind of immersion breaking. Okay, so I'm going to try and launch myself towards this planet over here as quickly as possible. It takes about 30 seconds. And as you can see, my GPU is being pretty much maxed out, as well as my CPU during this process. So it is optimized in that way. I mean, it is maximizing the potential of both my CPU and GPU. So that's cool. I'm not getting it, running at 30% and giving me like 5 FPS, which is what it was doing when I first launched the game. Okay, so once we get to this planet, what I'm hoping to show you is the issue with loading lots and lots of data at once. The fact that this game doesn't have loading screens. That comes at a price. And once we hit this planet, you should be able to see it. Now pay attention to the FPS as we break through the atmosphere. Okay, it should tank pretty heavily. Now it depends on the planet. It did tank down to around 60. There you go. It dropped down to 34, and you can see the horrible dithering as I get close to the actual terrain itself. So yeah, that happens a lot. Now that was a very weak example, but it has been significantly worse to the point where the game is actually frozen for about 3 seconds as soon as I enter the atmosphere. Now you can see the dithering in greater effect because it's daytime, and it just doesn't look very good, The game itself is not a very pretty game. The texture resolution is very low, overall fidelity isn't great, you can see the tiling texture on the water there. It's not a great looking title. I mean, when you compare what I'm looking at right now to some of those early videos they released of No Man's Sky, some of the promotional stuff, I do feel kind of slightly misled, to be honest. It's a pretty shitty looking game in terms of graphical fidelity. You may see my ship leaning around there. That's another issue that Total Biscuit and other people have raised. You can't actually fly into the ground. If I try and hit the ground, the game won't allow me to do that. It tries to automatically avoid obstacles for you, but as a result, it's constantly shifting and changing the flight model as you fly, and it makes the whole control scheme just feel really unintuitive and not very enjoyable to engage in. Okay, so let's land here and see what the FPS is like. It's around 57 here, so this planet's a little bit more performance intensive for some reason. So let's land, get out, and have a look at what the performance is like here. And as I said, it will drastically change depending on the planet you're on. This is kind of a barren planet, so I would expect decent frame rates, but I'm getting around 70. Okay, some of these particle effects, these wind, dust particle effects, seem to tank FPS for whatever reason. And as far as I can tell, there isn't actually a setting for that. Shadow detail, texture detail, reflection quality, generation detail. So there's no particle detail, which would be nice to have as well because the frame rate right now is running around 49. Now, again, GTX 980, pretty decent CPU, far exceed the requirements for this title, and yet I'm getting around 50 FPS. So it's pretty clear to me that there needs to be some optimization done to the performance of this game, as well as the asset streaming technology, because it does lead to a lot of hitching. But if you are getting like 10 FPS, do the thing I told you to do in the beginning of the video. Set everything to low, apply it, restart the game, set everything to high, apply it, restart the game, and that should help. If you want more specific information on what we can change to get some performance, I suggest you read the Reddit thread I'm posting below. So yeah, my conclusion is this. It doesn't look that great when you consider how badly it performs. The hitching, while not particularly apparent in this video, has been extreme at times and has drastically hampered my performance and my experience of the title. Overall, though, for me, it is playable. It's just not remotely ideal and not what I think we would expect for a $60 title. If you found this video helpful or useful in some way and you want to support my channel, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. If you want to support me financially, you can do so on Patreon. You'll find a link in the description box below for that as well. And I will be reviewing this title. I'm planning to get it out on Monday, so stay tuned for that. Thank you for watching, and I will see you guys next time.